Out of all of Elden Ring's main attributes, there are 5 of them that directly affect the amount of damage that the player character will do: Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. As for the way Elden Ring calculates damage, it is both complicated and convoluted, so we will be dealing with that in its own specific video. For now, in the present video, we will focus on the characteristics and details of Intelligence. Intelligence in Elden Ring is defined as the attribute required to perform glintstone sorceries. It also boosts the magic power of intelligence scaling spells and weapons, as well as improve our magic resistance. This is the first caster stat in our list of attributes, and it governs the magic of study, discovery, and destruction. Let's take a look at everything it can do. The first thing to talk about is the most basic but also the most important one. Intelligence is the stat required in order to wield certain weapons and to cast sorceries. Some of the more magically inclined weapons have intelligence requirements to meet, as does every sorcery in the game. Let's use the Carian Knight Sword and the Glintstone Pebble spell as examples. You can see that the sword has a requirement of 18 intelligence to wield, while Glintstone Pebble has a requirement of 10 intelligence to cast. If you do not meet these requirements, then you will see that the sword's damage is heavily reduced, and that your character will not be able to cast the spell. Unlike when we spoke about strength, when it comes to intelligence, there are no mechanics in the game that can help you meet these requirements. You need to meet or exceed them using your levels, consumables, or equipment. There is no way around it. Weapon damage scaling is a complicated subject. It is made up of multiple concepts and various calculations. I will be covering all of this in detail in a separate video. For now, the basic notion with intelligence is that all weapons that have intelligence scaling will have their damage increased as you level up your intelligence stat. Damage scaling is determined on a weapon per weapon basis, meaning that each specific weapon has different conditions and each will show different data. It is important to understand that intelligence scaling will increase the magic portion of a weapon's damage. I ran the number for multiple weapons in order to test the data, and it is possible to establish different soft caps for the stat. For the scaling data, we will be using a magic longsword plus 25, which has a B scaling in intelligence. Please be reminded that this data is for the magic damage portion of the attack rating, as this is the only portion that intelligence affects. Please take a look at these charts. On the top, you will see the correlation between your intelligence stat and the total AR of the magic longsword. In other words, what is the total AR of this weapon on each level of intelligence. On the bottom, you will see the correlation between your intelligence stat and the AR increase of the weapon. In other words, how much actual AR we get each time that we level up our intelligence. As always, it is important to look at the shape of the charts. On the top, you see that the damage increase is more pronounced in the earlier levels, but as you get to the later levels of intelligence, the increase begins to flatten out. As we have talked about with every other stat, this is the work of diminishing returns. The more intelligence you have, the less you get from each level. How much less exactly? Well, let's take a look at the bottom chart. As you can see, the earlier levels give either 4 or 5 AR per level. This is a lot. But then, at about level 20, the increase drops to either 3 or 2 AR per level. This drop marks the first soft cap of the skill at level 20. Then, we continue to get about the same AR, 2 or 3 points, all the way up to level 50, where it drops again to mostly 1 AR per level, with one single instance of a 2 AR increase. This is the second cap of the skill at level 50. And then, we continue to get mostly 1 AR per level until we hit level 80. From then on, we get either 1 or 0 AR, with multiple levels providing no increase at all. So this is the third and final soft cap at level 80. Past this level, it is not worthwhile to level up intelligence, as the returns we get are too few for the investments that we make. Please remember, damage scaling is complicated. This data that I am showing you is specifically for a magic longsword. Other weapons have different scaling, so they have different data. That said, the shape of the chart is always roughly the same, so we can establish the 3 soft caps: level 20, level 50, and level 80. Now, these soft caps apply to most instances of magic damage. I say most because there is an exception within a group of weapons. As I was testing different armaments, I saw that for whatever reason, some daggers infused down the cold path presented a different set of soft caps. These daggers are the Dagger, Parrying Dagger, Misericord, Celebrant's Sickle, Great Knife, Wakizashi, Bloodstained Dagger, and the Earth Steel Dagger. For these specific weapons, the soft cap for their magic portion of damage changes to level 18, level 60, and level 80. In the large scope of things, this change is not very significant. The soft caps are not too different from the standard ones, and it is only applicable to a single weapon type. Nevertheless, it is worth taking note of it if you plan to use these daggers. As mentioned in the introduction of this video, intelligence is a caster stat, and that means that it is a basic and very important part of the damage that our sorceries will do. The more intelligence we have, the more damage that our spells will inflict on our enemies. That being said, we still have to keep in mind the different soft caps that sorcery scaling presents among all of the different stats that we have available to cast the spells. Each and every stat in the game has an intelligence scaling of some degree, and much like the weapons, each staff presents its own specific data when it comes to sorcery scaling. Nevertheless, I have tested these staffs, and it is possible to establish a concise set of soft caps that we can follow when we are interested in building a spellcaster character. Please take a look at these charts. Throughout my testing, I have found that the scaling data of the different sorcery staffs is quite complicated. Different staffs produced widely different data based on different reasons. Some of them were expected, while others not so much. After compiling all of the information, I managed to organize all of the staffs into 3 general groups: standard staffs, hybrid staffs, and backloaded staffs. Standard staffs are those that present standard scaling data, meaning that they are affected by diminishing returns much like all other armaments in the game. The more intelligence that you have, the less benefit you get from each point you invest into it. The soft caps that standard staffs present fall within the expected parameters. Hybrid staffs are those that receive their sorcery scaling from 2 different stats. One of them is always intelligence, while the other can be faith or arcane. These kinds of staffs are affected by diminishing returns much earlier, providing harsher scaling drops and a faster maturity when it comes to investment limits. This is expected because when we use hybrid staffs, we should invest into both of the scaling stats equally instead of specializing in only one. Backloaded staffs are very special. They show an initial disregard for diminishing returns. In fact, the more levels you put into intelligence, the more their scaling increases. Seemingly, they are unaffected by drops in scaling power, especially in the later levels of the stat. That said, they do have a limit and a cap. Once they reach this cap, their scaling power completely vanishes. These staffs do not have a gradual effect from diminishing returns. Instead, it is sudden, drastic, and it happens at the very end of the stat investment. Let's shift our focus to the charts. We have 3 sets of charts which represent the 3 groups of staffs that we just went over. We will be using the Glintstone staff as an example for standard staffs. Then there is the Gelmir Glintstone staff as an example for the hybrid staffs. And finally, we will be using the Staff of Loss as an example for the backloaded staffs. In each group, the charts on the top will show you the correlation between your intelligence stat and the total sorcery scaling of the corresponding staff. In other words, what is the total sorcery scaling of each staff on each level of intelligence. On the bottom, you will see the correlation between your intelligence stat and the sorcery scaling increase of the corresponding staff. In other words, how much actual sorcery scaling we get each time that we level up our intelligence. As I always say, it is important that you look at the shape of each chart. Starting with the glintstone staff, we can see that we get either 3 or 4 sorcery scaling per level, very consistently up to level 60. Once we hit this level, the scaling drops to an additional 1 or 2 sorcery scaling per level, although it is mostly 2 per level. This continues up to level 80. After this level, the scaling power drops once again. This time, we still get 1 or 2 sorcery scaling per level, but there are many more instances of only 1 per level instead of 2. From this data, it is clear to see that this staff and those that follow a similar scaling pattern have 2 clear soft caps, one of them at level 60 and another one at level 80. After level 80, it is not worth investing more points into intelligence, as we would not get much more benefit. Moving on to the Gelmir Glintstone staff. This is a hybrid scaling staff, and it is very clear to see from this chart. We notice that this staff gets either 3 or 4 sorcery scaling per intelligence level up until we reach level 30. After this level, we begin to either get 2 or 1 sorcery scaling per level up until we reach level 45. From here on, the sorcery scaling really plummets as we start to only get either 1 or 0 sorcery scaling from each level of intelligence. On top of all of that, we can see that about half of the levels from 45 to 99 intelligence give this staff no improvement at all. From this data, we can clearly establish that this staff and others from the hybrid group have a very clear soft cap at level 30 and another one at level 45. This makes sense, as we will be increasing the sorcery scaling by also increasing the second stat that these staffs take advantage of. Finally, let's talk about the Staff of Loss and backloaded staffs. With these stats, the more you level up intelligence, the more scaling they get, of course, until they reach their cap. This is very easy to see with this example. The Staff of Loss gets either 2 or 3 sorcery scaling, mostly 3, on every intelligence level, consistently up until level 60. And then, after this level, its sorcery scaling power increases as it begins to receive either 3 or 4 sorcery scaling points per level, and this continues up to level 80. After that level, the scaling power completely evaporates, and it only gives either 1 or 0 sorcery scaling per level, with multiple levels providing no increases whatsoever. From this data, we can see that these backloaded staffs have a consistent sorcery scaling power that suffers an increase at the later levels of scaling. Once that burst of increase is over, the scaling power disappears completely. Through the chart, we can see that there is only one soft cap for the Staff of Loss and others like it. It is level 80. After going through the weapon scaling and the sorcery scaling that intelligence provides for our characters, we can't help but notice that there is a lot of variation in the data. Weapons scale differently than sorceries, and even more complicated is the fact that sorcery staffs scale differently among themselves, depending on what kind or what group they belong to. All in all, it can be a bit confusing. For this reason, I want to simplify the choices that you have and provide you with some basic guidelines that you can follow in order to always obtain the maximum benefit from your intelligence investments. The first thing I want to go over is how much total intelligence a character should have. For this, I believe that the most important thing is to determine if your character will focus mostly on melee combat or spellcasting. There are a lot of good melee weapons that take advantage of magic scaling. We can also infuse a lot of weapons down the magic or cold path as well. If the main source of damage for your characters will be melee attacks, then I recommend that you level up intelligence up to level 50. This will maximize your melee damage power while also giving you many extra levels to put into other stats that will benefit this playstyle. On the other hand, if you are making a character that will focus mostly on casting spells, then we will be taking advantage of some staffs that obtain great power from higher levels of intelligence. Also, some of the best spells in the game have much higher intelligence requirements. So, for this playstyle, I definitely recommend a full 80 points of intelligence investment. Remember, 50 int for melee, 80 int for caster. The other thing that I want to simplify is the matter of the sorcery staffs. Different kinds of staffs have different scaling, and their power levels vary greatly depending on how much intelligence your character has. This can sometimes make it difficult to understand which is the best staff to use. To resolve this issue, I offer you an easy-to-understand list of which staff is best at what level of intelligence. From 10 intelligence up to 40 intelligence, you have two choices. The Demi-Human Queen's staff is the best staff for these levels on a general basis, but it does require you to spend upgrade materials in order to keep up this superiority. On the other hand, you can use the Meteorite staff throughout these levels and it will be the best if you focus on using gravity sorceries or if you do not want to use upgrade materials on your staff this early in the game. Next up, from 41 intelligence up to 68 intelligence, the Academy Glintstone staff is the most powerful staff that you can use. Now, from 69 intelligence all the way up to 99 intelligence, the best staff that you can use is the Carrion Regal Scepter. Finally, we have to make a mention of Lusat's Glintstone staff. This staff is the most powerful staff in the game from 52 intelligence all the way up to 99 intelligence, but it has the additional condition that it increases your FP consumption by 50%. This staff is about 10% more powerful than the Carrion Regal Scepter, so you, my dear viewer, will have to make the decision whether this 10% additional damage is worth 50% higher FP costs. Intelligence is one of those stats that also has its own specific effect. In this case, increasing this stat will also increase the magic defense of our character. Magic defense is our character's natural ability to resist magic type damage. The more defense we have, the less damage of this kind that we will take from different sources. This means that the higher our intelligence, the more protected we will be from magic. The rate of increase is as follows. We get +2 magic defense from levels 1 to 20 intelligence. We get an additional 0.66 points of magic defense from 21 to 35 intelligence. We get an additional 0.4 points of magic defense from levels 36 to 60 intelligence. And finally, we get an additional 0.25 magic defense from levels 61 to 99 intelligence. Magic has always been very powerful in the Souls games, and Elden Ring is no different. Not only this, but sorceries are very fun in this game. The different effects and types of magic provide many uses for it, both in terms of damage and support. While it is true that intelligence does not do many different things, it is very good at what it does. In the same way, while it can be considered complicated in terms of its details, it is also possible to streamline its capabilities to make sure that we are taking full advantage of its power. I was honestly not a fan of sorceries and intelligence in the past games, but I quickly grew fond of it in Elden Ring, especially since it has some good synergy with strength, which is, after all, one of my favorite stats. Thank you very much for your time, and I do hope I get to see you on the next one.